working stage of the mental health group. Group counseling.
Okay, so we're going to continue with our group therapy series. And in today's lesson, I'm going to talk to you about the working stage of group. As you may recall, that there are 4 general stages of group. We talked about the initial stage. We talked about the transition stage. In the most immediate video I did before this, we talked about group dynamics and factors that are at play. Now let's talk about the working stage, which is the third of the 4 stages. All right, so let's start with our learning objectives. So the first learning objective is to appreciate the dynamics associated with group process and development, demonstrate some leader interventions for exploring fear at various stages of group. We'll identify key characteristics of the group during the working stage. We'll distinguish the difference between a working group versus a non-working group. We'll identify ethical and cultural relevant strategies for designing and facilitating groups. And then we'll continue with a discussion of choices that are made during the working stage, therapeutic factors that are at play and how they impact group effectiveness. We'll talk about self-disclosure from the member, self-disclosure from the leader, guidelines for giving and receiving feedback. And I talked about this briefly in an earlier lecture, the importance of compassionate criticism. And then we'll talk about identifying issues with co-leaders during the working stage. So one thing that is important to start off with in principle is we talk about these 4 stages, but there's no arbitrary line between each phase. And when we talk about phases or stages, there has to be a transformative shift that happens in order to move from one stage to another, right? And some groups will make it to the working stage. Some groups may not reach the working stage, right? And the development of the group as a whole tends to ebb and flow, right? So it's dynamic, it's not static, it doesn't stay the same. So as I said earlier, work happens at every stage, not just a working stage. So I don't want you to think that working stage means now we're doing work. Remember when we talked about the goals of each stage, the goal of the initial stage is to establish trust. So that's the work that's being done. The transition stage is addressing risk-taking and the initial stages of conflict, right? So each stage has its own function, but not every group reaches the working stage, as I said. And even if the group as a whole is in a working stage, not every individual is at the same point at the same time. So we have to understand their individual differences even when the group moves. So you have to be mindful where the group is and where the individual is.
As of right now, we paid
But to reach the working stage, members must make a commitment to work through challenges and face issues and barriers that are interfering with the group's progress. So there has to be an openness for change. There has to be a willingness to receive criticism and work on any resistance or unwritten agendas that a person has or hidden agendas that a person has. It's important to commit that you're going to look at those. And I said work happens at every stage, but there is a deeper exploration of the self, deeper
1,000.
exploration
50
of
so far.
the functioning within the
And
group.
we still owe 290.
And this occurs as a function of the
So
group
after
coming
that,
together. So when you have group cohesion,
once she gets paid.
then you could start to look deeper. So that closeness that you have
1,040 total.
with the other members of the group
And then also owe
allows
her
you to feel
for
safe,
4 days.
allows you to
Because
receive
she's
criticism,
since.
and allows you to explore
And then we should be
blind
above.
spots that you might have on a deeper level. So that's important. So interventions at each stage. One intervention we have at the initial stage is to provide encouragement. When we talked about the transition stage, the interventions demand more from the member than at the initial stage. So now the member has to be self-driven a little more. And then in the working stage, the entire group is working. The entire group is focusing on the member's personal work and vice versa. So you start by getting people to take risks and trust and share. Then they're self-governed, and then the group can put a spotlight on an individual. And last but not least, encourage members to see how they change as a function of the group, right? So we look for transformation in the final stage. All right. So the group norms and behavior of the working stage. One norm is that we support and challenge members of the group. We encourage people to take risks. In terms of intervention, there's no singular intervention that you do. I will say that the lecture on theories and interventions was helpful because a lot of what we said comes back in this stage. There's definitely more interaction between the members. Members are more direct. Members are starting to challenge one another, and they're starting to focus on action-oriented behavior. All right, so we tend to see in a working group that there's a large amount of trust. That trust is established. Members' goals are clear and specific. They focus on the present. Now they're willing to make themselves known. You may recall in a transition phase, we talked about people taking risks and putting their toe in the water. Now, they're no longer just putting their toe in the water, they're diving headfirst into the water, right? So they're making themselves known. And it came as a function of all the trust and risk-taking activities that occurred prior. Cohesion is close, everyone feels a bond to one another. Where there's conflict, it's identified, recognized, and explored. Remember, we said in a transition stage that conflict is not a bad thing. Conflict can result in closeness, can result in intimacy. So at this point, the members of the group can identify conflict. They can healthily address conflict. They can explore the sources of conflict and so forth. All right. In terms of a non-working group, it's sort of the opposite mirror of it. So instead of having trust, there's mistrust in the group, there's unexpressed feelings, there's a focus more on others than oneself. People tend to hold back, and instead of addressing conflict, they're ignored or they're addressed in indirect ways. Now, what's interesting about this is, we said conflict can be a good thing, right? So ignoring conflict or avoiding conflict or trying to communicate, address conflict in indirect ways actually doesn't solve the problem. It creates an opportunity for there to be miscommunication or for people to misinterpret what you're trying to say. So all of these things have to be attended to in the working stage. So we have a choice, right? So there are decisions that people are making as members of the group. The first one is whether to share or not share, whether to self-disclose or whether to remain anonymous, right? So when people speak up in a group, they're taking a risk. That requires a sense of trust. Whereas people who remain silent, they're keeping their views anonymous, they're not actually giving the group the experience, right? Authenticity versus guardedness, right? So being real and being raw as appropriate, that would be being authentic, versus being guarded would be holding back and not allowing the true self to come out. Being spontaneous versus regulated, right? Being spontaneous, you'll notice in initial stages, the group leader might call upon people, right? But by the working stage, people should just naturally chime in, naturally share, demonstrate a sense of spontaneity. Whereas people might, if they don't feel that there's trust, they might be more regulated or guarded, or I use guarded, but they might control their actions a little more. Acceptance versus rejection. One of the biggest questions in the initial stage is whether or not you're going to be accepted or rejected, right? So at this point, you're making a decision whether you feel part of the group and accepted. If you feel more accepted, you're going to be more likely to participate. If you feel rejected, you're going to be more likely to distance yourself from the group and not take risks. Unity versus fragmentation. Unity or cohesion is absolutely essential for the working stage, right? Where versus fragmentation, where people are working on their own agenda versus the collective goals of the group, that would be more fragmentation. Now, the group, in terms of homework, we talk about giving, it's a laboratory. That's the best way to say it. It's a laboratory where you can try things out. You can learn new behaviors, you can learn new sets of skills. It's a training ground, whatever you want to say. But the work should happen in between groups. So if you use homework, you give people an opportunity to connect to what happened in between groups, which means that instead of having 60 to 90 minutes with these individuals, now you're giving them the opportunity to think about the experiences of group 24/7. You're giving them the full range of experience. Members can design their or devise their own homework assignments, right? So when we talk about individual goals within a group setting, if you want to work on something, you say, well, what's one thing you might want to commit to this week? And then members might say, well, my goal is X. This week I'm going to work on Y. And that's fine. That's perfectly fine. In terms of what you settle on, many times the homework is done in a collaborative way, which is not just the member themselves, but the leader is supposed to facilitate that or shape that or change it up if appropriate, or guide the homework process. The leader also plays a role in helping form homework. In psychoeducational groups, it actually is more often the leader who gives the homework. All right, so in terms of therapeutic factors that operate in a group, we talked about self-disclosure, sharing about oneself, different levels of that. That's important, right? So people should share about themselves, offer feedback. So this is other members of the group offering feedback about their experience of another person, confrontation, and again, an appropriate confrontation, as we emphasized in another lecture, finding a sense of cohesion or universality, hope, purpose, Now, these are a list you might have remembered you saw in the first lesson as well, but now you're starting to see them really at play and how they actually come. So people might come into a group very depressed and despondent, but as a function of the group process, they might feel more hopefulness, willing to take risks and trust, feeling accepted, feeling more empowered versus disempowered, feeling catharsis, a release of whatever has been bothering them or plaguing them, working on their thoughts, focusing on a commitment to change, an invitation to experiment with who they want to be, not who they were in the past. And humor. Humor is important. I actually use humor all the time in session because I find that there's a natural tension that happens in all therapy processes. So using humor can release some of that tension. All right, so about self-disclosure, whenever you share, it should be related to the purposes of the group. It should help the group move forward. And those of you who've had experiential part of the class, you've seen how group leaders can model self-disclosure in an appropriate way to get people talking, right? So self-disclosure is very important because it allows all the thoughts and feelings you're experiencing and that keep recurring to have an outlet, right? So your level of self-disclosure, that which you self-disclose, it depends on many things. Number one, the stage of the group might determine what's appropriate. So it's not uncommon for people to be very authentic in the initial stage, but in the working stage, people are going to share at a deeper level, right?
Yes.
And in terms of what you disclose, no one can make you share something you don't want to share. So what you disclose, how much you disclose is entirely up to you, right? But we know that if people feel safe in a group setting, they're going to be more likely to self-disclose, right? Because they feel that they're not under attack. So when you give feedback, right? So another thing is giving feedback to other people. Give honest feedback, right? So you don't benefit another person by not giving them real feedback. So if you see something in a person that's not okay, you can bring it to their attention. But you should do it with sensitivity. You may recall in an earlier lesson when you're offering constructive criticism, there are principles at play, right? So make sure those principles are fulfilled. Make sure that the other people, how their behavior affects you, right? So speak from your point of view in a non-judgmental way, and try not to offer global feedback like you never do this, always do that, or overgeneralizations in general are not going to be helpful.
The check engine light is on the thing up here.
Catharsis. Catharsis is a relief or an expression of pent-up emotions, right? So there are times in the group process where people are having an intense moment and they're adding, you might have two members of the group locking horns, but as a feel healing, right? And as a function of that, they feel closer to the person, even the person they were locking horns with. So you can have a catharsis or release by being authentic, by sharing your emotions, releasing them. Now, be careful with how deeply you dive into emotions. because you have to be able to repackage the experience, right? So maybe that deep emotional experience wouldn't be appropriate for a parenting group, let's say. I don't know. Actually, I can see reasons why it might be appropriate for a parenting group, but there might be settings where that deep expression of emotions, you may not want to go that deep. All right. What happens after the cathartic event? Well, first you want to link the emotions with their thoughts, behavior. So if they had this insight, this incredible self-discovery or release, we ask them, what are you thinking right now? What are you feeling? How might you take this and put it into action when it comes to behavior? So we link the emotions with thoughts and behaviors. And absolutely, it's important to link that catharsis with some kind of behavioral outcome or action plan going forward. When we talk about co-leading a group in a working stage, between group sessions, you're supposed to discuss the reaction to group members, see how each one's interacting with one another, and how you can help participants better understand themselves, better understand their behavior within the group, and resolve some of their conflict, right? So you also use an opportunity to evaluate how the group is going and how it's going as a group co-leader, right? So how are we doing as facilitators? And then, we evaluate orientation styles, self-discovery, interventions we might use. Now, the member function. What should members be experiencing at the working stage? Well, they should come into group ready to talk. They should come into group ready to share experiences that they want to bring up or issues that they want to bring up. They should be committed to offering feedback to another person. And if they're receiving feedback, they should be committed to an open-mindedness to whatever feedback they're doing. They should be willing to take risks. They should be willing to practice new skills and interventions in their daily life. And they should be willing to evaluate how they're feeling with the group experience and their relative satisfaction with the group. Now, leader function, your job as a leader is to model appropriate behavior. We've been saying this from the initial stage, or continue to model self-disclosure, appropriate behavior. If people are trying to take risks, you want to support people's willingness to take risks and encourage people to get a little bit beyond their comfort zone. And then if they do take a risk, you want to help them turn it into some action, right? You also want to, there are going to be times you want to do a deeper dive on a person, further self-exploration, right? So in the event that you see someone is stuck or about to be have a catharsis, you might see someone is stuck or about to be have a catharsis, you might do a deeper sense. You might look for common themes across members of the group, provide some universality. I like to use the phrase, can anyone join this person with this experience? Has anyone had a similar experience, right? And with that, you're identifying universality. And then, you're promoting behaviors that will increase cohesion at the function of decreased cohesion. So is a very quick rundown of the lesson. So I'm going to stop there. And until next time, everybody.
Yeah.
There's one simple hearing hack anyone can use to improve their hearing almost overnight. If you've been suffering with hearing loss or tinnitus, you need to see this. Did you know that hearing impairments have nothing to do?
Okay, in the previous discussion, we talked about the initial stages of group. So as a logical progression, next we're going to talk about the transition stage of group. So as I mentioned, there are 4 stages we're going to focus on. So let's start there. In terms of learning objectives, we're going to describe the dynamics associated with the group process and development. We're going to identify and understand key characteristics of the group during the transition stage. We're going to explore ways of effectively dealing with defensiveness and reluctant behavior. We will critically evaluate the notion of reluctance. We'll talk about some common fears and anxiety of members during the transition stage. And, you know, I'd like to compare and contrast at the different points in group to think about it, right? We're going to gain a greater appreciation or deeper appreciation for how to explore conflict. We're going to talk about effective and ineffective confrontation styles. And I touched upon this in a previous video as well about avoiding aggressive confrontation. And we're going to think about how to therapeutically address problematic behaviors. Now, we're also going to try and conceptualize, well, why is the person doing what they're doing? So trying to understand the dynamics of a person's problematic behavior is also going to be important. We'll describe the behaviors, transference and countertransference. I touched upon this briefly in the theories lecture, and we're going to talk about issues of co-leadership during the transition stage. All right. So let's start by way of introduction. There is an unwillingness to disclose ways that people are struggling, right? And when a person doesn't feel comfortable disclosing what they're experiencing, that might keep that individual from growing, and it might also keep members of the group from growing. So there is an internal struggle that happens, which is normal, right? We talked about in the initial stage, people are developing trust, but now they're starting to, but they're struggling at this point, but their lack of participation could actually hold them and the group back. So during the transition phase, this is where a lot of the patterns of problematic behavior start to emerge, because we're going to see a little bit more risk taking than in the first stage, the initial stage. Now you're going to start to see some problematic behavior emerge. Anxiety and defensiveness are common, right? So people are still uncertain where they fit in. They're still trying to figure out how to express themselves. So there is still some anxiety, but also defensiveness, because what's interesting is now some people are starting to share, but if they share something about you, you could be threatened by it, right? So there could be some defensiveness that emerges as well to protect oneself from criticism. The group members themselves, they oftentimes are trying to test the leader and test other members to determine how safe the environment is. So you may not know you're being tested, but a person might say a comment and just watch. And I said in a previous video that it's possible that if the members or the group leader react in an adverse way, that person determines that this is an unsafe environment.
They're torn, there's ambivalence in terms of emotions, whether to play it safe or whether to take a risk. And remember I said people open up at different speeds. So there is going to be, a dance that happens during the transition stage. We are also starting to see the members are evaluating the group leader to see if they are trustworthy. Now, dependable, allows things to go up to a certain point, but if it becomes unsafe, they engage in blocking, right? So that it doesn't go too far. And now they're already starting to learn how to express themselves, right? In the beginning, there was anxiety about expressing oneself, but now they're starting to try and express themselves in a way that other people will listen. So there are a lot of thoughts around that. So how do you gauge whether trust has been established, right? I said in the initial stage, the goal is to establish trust. You can determine that there's a low level of trust, potentially, I don't want to say guaranteed, but potentially you can see there's a lack of trust based on attendance. So if people are showing up late, people are leaving early, people are missing sessions.
How to kill all mosquitoes in the area in 90 seconds. This simple but brilliant trick you can do tonight to eliminate all mosquitoes around you is taking America by storm. An ingenious college student from Utah just turned the pest control industry upside down with a device that eradicates mosquitoes from any environment in record time.
The group and an individual doesn't do it, that might be an indicator of low trust in the group or the group process. Denial is an issue. So denial of problems or concerns could be based on fear or lack of trust. They might over intellectualize instead of talking about how they feel. They may talk about what they're thinking and make broad or general global statements. This is a way of demonstrating lack of trust, right? So if you trust the group and you trust the leader, you can be more specific about your personal experience, right? So hiding behind global statements and intellectualizations doesn't help. Now, if you don't, again, every group is going to have conflict. Conflict is supposed to be part of the group process. With conflict comes intimacy. You're going to grow. But if a person is unwilling to deal with conflict in a group, that also could be an indicator that there's a lack of trust in the group. Now, what are some of the fears that emerge at this point? Well, there's a fear of making a fool of oneself. Again, that is pretty similar to what we said in the initial stage. There might be a sense of emptiness or void that emerged. That's new. A sense of losing control, feeling that they're going to lose control over what they say. They're going to blurt something out that's inappropriate or harmful. Or they might be overly emotional. They might be afraid of that. They might be afraid to self-disclose, right? Therapy is a unique experience where you're encouraged to share in such a deep and vulnerable way. So there could be a fear of self-disclosure as a whole. And then people are sharing, they could fear monopolization. They might be afraid they might monopolize the group's time. So they might be afraid they're taking too much of the group's time. We also have fears of being judged, challenged, singled out, or rejected, right? So some of these are consistent with the initial stages of groups, such as being judged or rejected. But being challenged or singled out is a new fear, because as people start to speak up and speak out, there can be some criticism thrown in many different directions. And that's okay. That's supposed to happen, right? Now, if you're going to offer constructive criticism, if you're going to offer confrontation, right? So it has to be caring confrontation, not aggressive confrontation. And we talked about caring confrontation and aggressive confrontation in previous lectures. But here are some general rules, right? So one is you should have a clear rationale why you're confronting the person, right? So it has to have a purpose, and if it doesn't have a function, then you can criticize. To criticize a person, confront a person for the sake of being critical is not useful. If you're criticizing with the rationale that you notice a functional problem, they're not performing up to their potential, or there's some kind of challenge related to that, then confront them, right? But we typically should only confront people that we care about, right? So confrontation brings intimacy, brings closeness. So you confront a person from a position of care and concern. When you're confronting a person, make sure you focus on your experience rather than the other person. It's very important to say, my experience with what is happening is ... So when you say my experience with what's happening is ... you're not saying it's the truth. You're saying it's your personal experience. You're also giving space for that person to say, well, no, that's not what was meant. That I see it a different way, or whatever it is. So you're avoiding dogmatic statements and judgment. Now, dogma is fixed statements or set statements that are unchangeable, and you're avoiding judgments about the other person. So when you keep it on you, it allows that person to process that a little bit better. And it also is very important to give space for that person to reflect on what you said, whether it be in that session or another session. Now, if there is a caring confrontation that happens, if you're the group leader, my recommendation is that you invite the person who received the criticism to weigh in. So if I said my experience with what's happening is that you seem to be avoiding addressing your thesis. Okay, let's say that was my statement. It's a criticism. It's a criticism, it's my experience. Doesn't have to be true, but as a group leader, I would go to and say, well, Dan said he experienced your answers in a way that you're avoiding dealing with your thesis. What's your point of view? What's your take on this? And if you're open to sharing, I would love to hear it. If you want to think about it more, feel free to bring it up here later in this session or the next session. And that gives that person time to process. Now, some people are going to have a natural reaction right away, and they're going to be able to weigh in. But for some people, especially deep thinkers, they want to spend a decent amount of time reflecting on what you said. And even in a moment, if they were defensive, right?
Neurologists are stunned. They've confirmed that ear ringing is shrinking your brain cells. Tinnitus is now known as a precursor to dementia, according to the Mayo Clinic, where doctors have made a shocking discovery that changes everything we know about ear buzzing and how it relates to mental decline. So if you...
Long term, they might say, yeah, you got it right, if it were true. Now, so what do you do with difficult behaviors of members? So if a member is engaging in a process that derails the growth of the group. Well, one I can tell you is don't respond to them sarcastically. And I actually have had an experience like this where I was guilty of engaging in sarcasm incorrectly. I was young and naive, but it doesn't solve the problem, right? So, and it creates a vulnerability there. So avoid sarcasm as much as possible. You want to encourage members to explore their defensiveness. So if a person has a strong reaction, you can describe it, right? So you can say, hey, it appears to me that what I said, hits home. Can you talk about the reaction you're having? So it invites the person to explore whatever defensiveness they might be experiencing. Notice how I said it. It appears to me that you might be having a strong reaction. So you're stating your observations, but in a very tentative way. It's so important not to engage in those dogmatic statements, right? So always speak, is it possible, maybe, my experience is that all of these things are tentative, right? And if a conflict emerges in the group, it's important for you to process that and try not to avoid or retreat from it, because avoiding the problem or retreating from the problem doesn't make the problem go away. In fact, it lingers not just in that person who's engaging in a difficult behavior in their mind, but all the members of the group. They're left to draw their own conclusions about what's up with that conflict. So you definitely want to explore it. You definitely want to process it. You don't want to retreat from it. And, as members of a group or as a leader of a group, people are designed, they're trying to test the limit. So if they challenge you, or they don't agree with you, or they push back, don't personalize it. It's okay to give people space to experience their emotions. It reminds me, I have 2 kids, and my son used to, whenever there was a form of discipline, I would take away, let's say, his video games or his Nerf gun or whatever it is, he would cry. And, as a parent, it hurts to see your kid cry, even if you needed to discipline them, right? So, I remember, I'll share one story about the Nerf gun. My son he had a Nerf gun, and he was playing with his sister, or he was, dare I say, using her as target practice. She wasn't playing. And he shot his sister with a Nerf gun. And she was like, Abba, Shalom shot me with a Nerf gun, right? So she told on her brother and said he shot her. And I was like, Shalom, please don't shoot your sister with the Nerf gun. He's like, okay. 5 minutes later, pop. Abba, he did it again. By the way, Abba is father or daddy in Hebrew. So I said, Shalom, don't shoot your sister. This is the second time. If you shoot her again, I'm taking your Nerf guns, I'm locking them away, and you won't see them until tomorrow. So here I am being an assertive parent, being stern, right? But you know what he did? As any kid would, trying to test the limits, pop, he shoots her a 3rd time. And at that point, I took away his Nerf guns, I locked them away, and he started to cry. And that's a normal reaction too. He started to cry. And, you know, instead of giving him back his Nerf guns, because he was crying, or personalizing the fact that I might have made him upset, in reality, it was his actions that resulted in that consequence, right? So from a behavior point of view, that was a natural consequence to his behavior. So I didn't personalize it. And I allowed him to feel what he feels. And I said to him, I said, you know, Shalom, it's okay to cry. Crying, it means that you're feeling an emotion and you're sad. And you want to talk about it? What are you sad about? I want my Nerf guns. You took away my Nerf guns. This is what he says. I'm like, okay, I understand. So you're sad that you lost your Nerf gun, right? Yeah.
Don't buy solar panels. Seriously, there is a very good reason why I'm saying this. If you're thinking about buying solar panels, don't. The US government will literally buy them for you if you take 60 seconds to answer a few questions below. Hi there. If you are a homeowner in America and you wouldn't mind saving a couple $1,000s on your electricity bill this year, then you're really going to love what the US government has just announced. You see, a few days ago, the US government released a new stimulus program with the goal to encourage as many Americans as possible to go solar, and that way contribute to a healthier planet. And they're giving away brand new solar panels and a Tesla Powerwall to ordinary Americans at no cost to you or your bank account. As they said, they'll even cover the cost of the installation. Plus, if that wasn't enough, you'll even be handed a $2,500 stimulus check on top of that, which means today, in case you still haven't gone solar, you can get solar panels installed on your house without paying a single dollar whatsoever. And of course, $2,500 for being generous enough to accept that offer. Crazy, right? And all you need to do to apply is take a short survey by clicking the button below this video and answer a few questions to see if you qualify. It takes only about 60 seconds. So if you'd like to start saving thousands of dollars on your electricity bill every single year, and finally generate your own power instead of relying on the grid to keep your light on, all while getting paid $2,500 to do so. Then click the button below this video and take a 60-second survey to see if you qualify before something gets in your way. And the next thing you know, your electricity bill got even higher, and you just can't seem to find this video again because the program has already ended. Seriously, don't let that happen and click the button below this video to qualify for the program while it's still available.
What is the best workout or diet for losing weight? The best way to burn fat and get shape. It's not keto, paleo, fasting, or vegan, and it's not super intense workouts. That ain't how you lose weight. Cardio burns fat, right? No, cardio actually burns calories, usually in the form of carbs in the bloodstream that are then replaced with the very next meal that you do and stored as more fat. And this is why even when you eat low-calorie foods or you run for an hour a day, you get softer, but you don't actually lose any weight. And this is one of the biggest reasons why most weight loss attempts fail within the first 3 weeks. The truth is that Hollywood's elite actors and actresses, they can get super ripped because they followed a long ignored technique that was used for generations of bodybuilders and athletes before steroids. Even film roll is starting in just a few weeks, so they can't waste time on the wrong program.
Without carbs, sugar, it was just not sustainable. But I gained it back so fast this time. I feel like I've done it the healthy way. I've lost 30 pounds. Just do it. Just do it. You won't regret it. You're gonna see it too. You're gonna be like, dang, I look good.
For a while, I just completely cut out carbs, and I realized that was a mistake. After I gave carbs back, I dropped another 30 pounds.
You will never have to be on the treadmill again. I want to say slowly the weight started coming off, but it came off faster than I thought it would.
You want to know why running on the treadmill 7 days a week doesn't work when you're trying to lose weight? Because aside from the cortisol buildup and inflammation, it's also not sustainable.
And one of the biggest fitness myths is when people say carbs make you fat. Carbs don't make you fat. I'm a big donut guy. All these foods are the best shape of my life. Carbs actually regulate your metabolism. Carbs are one of the best ways to give your body and your muscles energy. You cycle your carbs properly. You eat more carbs than you probably ever have eaten on a diet, and you get far better results than you probably ever gotten on a diet. I don't even weigh 200 pounds. You've lost. That's insane.
I now went from a 6XL. I can now say that I'm the largest. I have lost right at 30 pounds. My jeans were falling off.
So you've lost.
53 pounds, going from 189 pounds to 136 pounds.
The science of weight loss was workouts you see online are literally a waste of time. There's already a proven research-backed way to lose weight and keep it off. We already did all the hard work for you to set all that information into a very simple and easy to follow plan that literally anybody can do. So this is our body type quiz. It's a free quiz. It's 6 different questions, super easy. It takes like literally 20 seconds. You can do it right now. And then at the end of it, it tells you what your body type is, but it also tells you the 3 most important things to do based on what your body type is, and it's completely free. So click the link below if anybody's watching and you want to figure out your body type. We won't ask for your email or anything like that. So you guys want to check it out, click that link below, take my free body type quiz and get your personalized plan. Right.
And I said, well, why did you lose your Nerf gun, right? And he said, well, did you have any warnings to stop? Yeah. And now what happened? Well, I lost my Nerf gun. And I say, you know, unfortunately, I can't give it back to you today because this is the punishment for the behavior. But you know, I understand your sadness. It's okay to be sad. And he cried a little bit, and then he went on to play. But so if I would have personalized his reaction as a parent, then I might have given in because no parent wants to see their kid cry. It hurts to see kids cry. But I did it because I understood that even if he said you're mean or you know, I guess all kids at one time, I hate you. He didn't in this case, but our kids can say, I hate you. Don't take it personally because that's them processing their emotions. And the same thing as a group leader, people might challenge you as a group leader or suggest that there's a better way to do things. But your job is not to take it personal, right? So avoid personalizing members' reactions. So, what are some problematic styles of behaving in a group? Now, you'll notice the way I'm phrasing this, I'm trying to avoid labeling the person. It's not the person that's problematic. There's problematic styles of behavior. So, silence. So, silence is a problem where you have the lack of sharing. Monopolizing or monopolistic behavior. So monopolistic behavior is when one person speaks. I'm sure you've been in classes where you want to make sure that everybody who wants to share has the opportunity to share. Storytelling. I would say storytelling can be useful. It can be problematic as well, but if the storytelling is to avoid addressing the question being posed to an individual, that kind of storytelling is problematic. But if you're telling a story to help connect with another individual, that storytelling is fine. Questioning. So it's okay. It's okay to question. But if a person is always why, well, that's not right, always challenging, then it can actually demoralize the group. Giving advice. And it's interesting that each of these, at one point or another, might actually be okay, but ongoing, it becomes a problem. People need to use therapy as a source of self-discovery. So telling people what to do or giving them advice isn't really helping them. Fostering a sense of dependency where a person says, oh, I didn't make it because I needed to run it by the group. I need you guys, right? It's okay to want to be part of the group, but feel community with the group, but sometimes it's important to make decisions. Offering pseudo support, giving fake empathy, right? I know what you're going through when you don't. Or hostility, or acting superior, or socializing. So when people are talking to each other in the middle of the group or subgrouping outside of the group, that can be a problem. Intellectualizing. So intellectualizing is to, instead of talking about thoughts and emotions, being overly logical in a way that they avoid having to deal with their feelings, could be a problematic style. Members becoming assistant leaders. There are some people who feel a need due to anxiety to play the role of the hero, or in the vacancy of a leader to become the leader. There is a feeling of a void, but some members might want to assist as a second group leader, and that's not helpful. That could be a problem. Or they might be doing it to please you. So you have to explore motivation behind that. So now in terms of defensiveness, so we also have to think about how do we handle defensive behavior in a therapeutic way, right? So it's okay defensiveness to be there. I encourage you not to fight defensiveness.
Table scraps for dogs.
Uh-oh.
Good or bad?
Another
eating
ad,
dinner and
but-
the dog is giving you puppy eyes and
So this is the guy who
Right.
actually wrote the book on group counseling. That's why he's so helpful.
If a person is experiencing, gently challenge them, gently encourage them, gently push them in a way to explore what they're defensive about rather than trying to fight them. And the worst thing you could say is, oh, you're just being defensive. Labeling it as defensiveness, albeit true, does not make a person less defensive. It encourages for members to say more rather than stopping at the initial point of resistance, right? So tell me more about that. Tell me more. I have a partial understanding of what you're saying. Help me see this a little more clearly, right? So now you're encouraging them, to move a little bit further away from the defensiveness. And if you're gonna do it, questions should be in an open-ended fashion. True or false, you're being defensive. Not a good question. You can say, I'm noticing or I'm sensing a level of discomfort right now. You want to talk a little bit about that. So now you're reflecting on the defensiveness, but in an invitational manner, right? There are ways to do this. And the whole group shuts down, or it appears to shut down. So if the whole group is engaging in avoidance, not dealing with the issues. So if a whole group chooses to shut down or engage in hidden agendas, you have to address it. So, as a group leader at that point, if it's one person, you can give them their space, but if the whole group has shut down or in acting on hidden agendas, you may have lost the group. So as a group, acknowledge what your group is looking to work on this issue. What might be going on? Can anyone have any thoughts as to why we haven't been able to do X, Y, Z? That kind of question will allow you to bring hidden agendas to the surface. And you'll be amazed that it's not hopeless. You can go in periods of ruts. Sometimes things plateau, especially if you have these long-term groups and they're open where you can just talk about anything. you could definitely see plateau moments or avoidance. So don't give up. Also, you do not indulge feelings of frustration and annoyance. So, if they shut down for a reason. If they're acting on hidden agendas, maybe hidden agenda is more important than the actual agenda that you set forth. So if you act on frustration and annoyance, it definitely won't address it. Now, transference and countertransference, again, transference, you start to see some of this in the transition stage, where feelings clients start to project their feelings onto the therapist, even though it's rooted in that member's past behavior, past experiences, or past relationships, whether it be a parent or whatnot. You also have countertransference. You can start to see potential over-identification by a therapist onto some of the group members. So they can project their unresolved conflict on the clients as well. And that actually can be damaging. It can be damaging to the member themselves, especially if it's a negative countertransference. But even if it's a positive countertransference, it can be damaging because you might engage in an enabling behavior and give them a pass that you wouldn't give another person. And then the other members of the group might also see that person either being treated as a mascot preferentially or as a scapegoat in a negative way. So you want to avoid that. You can have multiple transferences in a group, obviously. Pay attention to how you react to the group leader as well as everyone in the group. That's going to be important. Now, in terms of co-leader issues, so you have to be careful with negative reactions towards one leader, right? So if there's negative reactions towards one leader, you have to explore what that's about. And the other co-leader has to strategize on how to deal with that and be of one voice and pit them against one another pit them against one another. Co-leadership has the same issue that you can just pose to both leaders, right? So if co-leaders in an antagonistic way or acting on their hidden agendas, have both leaders, it's possible, right? It doesn't have to be just one. So you have to think about that and monitor it. That's going to start to happen in a transition stage, right? It isn't as much in the initial stage because still on this behavior, still trying to figure out where they fit in.
If you want to slim down, you should skip breakfast. True or false?
The idea of breakfast
False.
was actually a bunch of marketing ploys.
You also have to deal with problem behaviors that we listed earlier in the lecture. You have to deal with them. You can't avoid them. Deal with them kindly, gently, in invitation, but you still have to address it. And if there are issues with countertransference and their co-leaders, it's the job of the co-leader or co-facilitator who's not engaging in countertransference to talk to the other leader. So member functions. What's the member's function? Well, this is your job in a transition stage. Your job is to recognize and express any persistent reactions, right? Now, that sounds very similar to the initial stage. We want you to, and that is an indicator of trust, but unexpressed feelings is an indicator of distrust. You also want to pay attention to your defenses, right? So if you're feeling defensive about something, honor that. You can even talk to the group, this issue has me feeling a little defensive, but I recognize that I'm being defensive and I want to work on that, right? So you don't have to force change overnight. You can honor your feelings, even if it's defensiveness, right? So you want to move from dependence and what should I do and being told by either the group members or group leaders how you should function to behaving in more of an independent fashion. There's nothing wrong with confronting one another as long as you have your thoughts, right? These are perfectly fine. This is constructive criticism. It's nothing wrong with that. Now, you have to work through conflicts, go through that fire. It's an uncomfortable fire, but you have to go through the conflict rather than remaining silent. So avoid silence, because silence means you shut down, and also avoid subgrouping outside of sessions where just a couple of you band together to talk, right? That's not helpful to anyone. If you needed to subgroup or you happen to subgroup, one of the things that I always ask people to do is acknowledge that they subgrouped in the next session and bring it back to the group. Even though it shouldn't happen, it's something about subgrouping. Now, as a leader, it's our to teach members the value of dealing fully with conflict. So it seems like conflict, they're bad words, they're not. So you have to teach them. You also have to assist members in recognizing their own defensive patterns. So if that happens and you notice it, as I said earlier, I'm noticing you seem a little bit uncomfortable with what we're discussing today. Do you want to talk about that? Things like that. You could do that, right? Teach people to honor their anxiety. It's okay. There's nothing wrong with anxiety. Fear and anxiety have an adaptive function. If it wasn't adaptive, then we wouldn't have it. So it protects us. In evolution, fear usually signals danger. So there's okay with experiencing fear and anxiety, their defensiveness, but it's our job to encourage you to work towards addressing what, because they do serve as a form of self-protection. It's a sort of like a turtle response. You go in your shell to protect yourself. You also want to, as a leader, model both directly and tactfully how to challenge members, show how to challenge members, because people may not do it right away. What I observed in running worked. We also see that it's important to encourage members to express actions in the here and now, right? So get historical or hysterical is not helpful. And that, in a nutshell, is the transition stage group therapy. So I'm going to stop there.
Apply makeup on the sure skin.
It's Dr. trying to sell me. He is the main dude. Oh shoot, it doesn't have me signed in, so I'm going to put it into Chrome. This is the guy who wrote the book on counseling, so that's always nice too, and describe what leading a group looks like, how hard it will be with your first time working with a group. Here he is again.
When
So I'm gonna
unseen
have to
threats
pause
lurk
it.
in your system, bad thing
There we go. So now I can subscribe to him.
has happened.
Let's make things.
And he looks like he actually goes through every single chapter of the group. And I feel like he did it during the pandemic. So that's partly why we have a lot of this pretty good online counseling. Oh, he's even doing the psychology of bank runs and contagions. Interesting. So I'm going to go. He's done quite a bit. He's got bipolar disorder. He's got some of the major diagnoses, and I guess he's monetized his channel too, which is interesting. So I want to see if it will go back 2 years when he did, group counseling. So he's got termination. He's also got strategies for working with kids, teens, and college students. He's got, and this dude's written a lot of books. So he is pretty good for doing these things. And I guess maybe he got bored during the pandemic. He has the initial stage of a group. So that is what we had just finished. And then screening participants. Can our group be children? Yes. Yeah. So, and on your D2L, I gave, so, and on your D2L, I gave you guys the methodology for running a group, and they have probably in the announcements, since I'm still not certified to teach online. Those are the PowerPoints. That was the syllabus. And oh, that's right. I did it inside of the group assignment. So if you go into assignments and see where you're leading the group, there should be an attachment that tells you how to lead the group. And it's under leading the group. And let me make sure I have that. It's the girl circle. So my recommendation is that a lot of you guys use, there it is, girl circle, leading the group, creation. And oh, I took off the link. Let's see if I can undo that. Undo. Of course not. So I'm not going to save or close that. But when you go into that, you actually want to click on where it shows you how to lead the group. So I'm going to try this again. So if I go into edit assignment, because save it, so it would still be a link. Yeah, there's the link. So that's how I go to it. All right, I'm going to send this out in announcements. It might be easier to access that way. This is a relationship with peers group. And we'll do share, copy link, and do it from there. And this is a good one we led at Lighthouse Youth Services with children. We also did the trauma group with kids. But I went through this in one of the first classes. I know I had the wrong time initially, but I at least labeled them right. So if you go back into the YouTubes, you'll see where I went through this. So it tells you how to facilitate. There's 10 weeks you can choose from to work with different kids and whatnot. It's week 1 is connecting with each other. Week 2 is labels, exploring new perspectives. Week 3 is expressing myself. 4 is accepting all different parts of myself. 5 is cultivating respect. 6 is giving voice to feelings. Part 1 and 2. Week 7. Week 8 is romantic relationships, what it's worth to you. And then 9 is girl fights or girlfriends. And then 10 is wholeness and completion. So that gives you a good list, and it literally from start to finish will show you how to lead the groups. And it tells you what to start with. It tells you what to work with. So I'll label this new announcement guide on how to lead your group, if it lets me label it. Guide on how to lead a group, weeks 1 and so it literally tells you everything you need to know about the Girls Circle curriculum. And so that will go out as an announcement, and hopefully that's helpful to you guys. I know some of you are still observing a group. And let's see here. That's some of the initial stages of the group, and then I was getting into week 7 because we're actually already halfway through this class, starting like pretty much like next week, which is when I'm giving you guys the full week to create your group and lead it and film it. So if you want to come in person, that is perfectly okay. Just remember this class is in room 3. This class is in room 320 at 10 a.m. on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So just not next week, which is, I think, on the 5th through the 10th. I'm in a conference. So week 7 is about distinguishing characteristics of a working group, which Dr. Kaplan explained very well. And then also differentiating interventions that occur in the working group stage from that occur in other group stages, and then identify and describe the important factors in the group process. So those are some of the breakdowns that I would give to you. Working stage is like once a group has progressed through the forming, storming, norming, and is the stage that focuses on the achievement of individual and group goals. So that's what Dr. Kaplan says, record at least 15 minutes and then turn it in. So the template I just sent out to you in announcements, and the template is also in our group assignment. So if you go into D2L, it has content or D2L. So leading a group has the link to leading a group, and then also under course tools and then announcements. And the most recent announcement has the link to it, and you should be able to click on it right here, and it'll let you download the group's Girls Circle. And it is mostly for ages 13 to 18. You could modify it, but it's so great because it goes through step by step how to lead that group. And our minimum billable time at Lighthouse was 15 minutes. So I kind of stick through. You starting on page 10, how you do your theme introduction, then the check-in, then the activity, then a sharing activity, and then a closing ritual. And that usually covers 53 minutes. And those are the 10 weeks that you get to see starting on page 9. And you can pick any of those weeks, just identify which group you're doing for that. And it'll help you guys with some of that. So hopefully that covers a lot of your questions for this. And it took me right into the file, and I kind of want to go back to where it was listed. So under assignments, I think I'm also have where you name your group and also identify which group you are leading. So I don't have leading the group turn in due until June 12th, so you still have 11 days to kind of do whatever. But in the meantime, I want to do one that's due basically middle of next week, say like the 7th. Not many points, but like choose title for your mental health group. And how you'll share the recording, either YouTube Live or Google Docs, because that gives you a lot of space, or even Dropbox. And that way you don't have to take up all of the space on your phone to share it. And it's an easy way to get points. You just like name the group you will lead. And how to record and share. You could also do it Zoom and record it to the cloud. I don't know if you have to have a paid account for that. They certainly let us do that, but that way you could actually have live interaction with people the way Dr. Kaplan does. So that's just like a few other options. People the way Dr. Kaplan does. So that's just like a few other options. And that should cover all for today. Lots of good questions though. I'm trying to plow through some of this stuff without a break, and that way we can finish up early. And oh, I guess it froze. Interesting. So with that, I will call it a day, if it lets me. All right, so yeah, cut me out for a second, the conference, to just answer any questions during this class goes till 12:30. So we have to be in the conference like 8 to 12 and then 1 to 5 every single day. And Central's paying for it. But it gives you a chance for those 2 days to kind of study the group content and create your own group. So I will see you all then.